What if the most powerful weapon I ever held wasn't my voice, but my silence? For most of my life, I believed that being understood was the same as being safe. I convinced myself that if I explained who I was with enough care, enough patience, people would eventually stop resisting me. They would accept me, stand with me, ease up. So I talked, constantly. I broke down every decision, every intention, every reason behind every move I made. I treated my identity like something fragile that needed nonstop protection, like a job with no days off. And for a long time, I told myself that was strength. It wasn't. The day I finally understood that truth, my life didn't explode or fall apart. It shifted, quietly, almost gently. But nothing was the same after that. I was living in a busy town called Millbrook. It wasn't beautiful. It wasn't calm. It was always loud, always watching. A place where everyone noticed everything and felt entitled to an opinion. I worked there as a high school history teacher. Young, ambitious, 5 years into the job, still clinging to the belief that teaching could truly change lives. To me, history was never about memorizing dates. It was about people, about pain, about courage, about terrible mistakes and impossible choices. It was blood and hope pressed into the pages of time. Teaching wasn't something I did just to earn a paycheck. It was part of who I was. I cared deeply about my students. I wanted them to think, not repeat, to question authority instead of fearing it, to feel curious when they didn't know something, not ashamed. But there was one truth I refused to face. I cared too much about how others saw me. Every decision came with an explanation attached. Every lesson needed a justification. Every creative idea had to be defended before it was even tried. If I changed an assignment, I explained myself. If I replaced a lecture with a discussion, I explained myself. If a student struggled, I explained why my method still made sense. My classroom wasn't the place on trial. I was. Every single day. 5 years at Millbrook High. 5 years of 12-hour days. I showed up early. I left long after everyone else. I planned lessons at 12 p.m. I graded papers until the words blurred together. I stayed after school to help students long after the hallways went silent. I gave everything I had, and somehow it was still never enough. The principal told me to follow the textbook more closely, said my approach confused people, said creativity made others uncomfortable, said taking risks wasn't worth the trouble. Other teachers smiled at me in the hallways, then criticized me behind closed doors. They said I was trying too hard, that I wanted attention, that I was showing off. Even my family questioned me. Why was I still teaching? Why not choose a real career? One with more money, more status, more respect? Parents joined in too. They wanted quiet classrooms, clear rules, old methods. And every time it happened, I explained. Long emails packed with studies and data, meetings filled with calm voices and careful words, follow-ups, clarifications, apologies I didn't owe. I defended myself like my entire future depended on it. Inside, I wasn't just tired, I was hollow. The kind of exhaustion no amount of sleep can fix. But I didn't know how to stop. Explaining had become a reflex. I kept telling myself the same lie over and over. If I say it better this time, they'll finally understand. They never did. All my explanations ever earned me was more resistance. And slowly, almost without me noticing, something inside me began to shut down. I stopped taking risks, stopped experimenting, stopped listening to that quiet inner signal that used to guide me. I no longer trusted my instincts. I no longer believed my voice carried weight. So I chose the safest path available. Safe lessons. Predictable lessons. Lessons designed to offend no one. Lessons no one could criticize. Lessons no one could attack. And without realizing it, my classroom transformed. It used to feel alive. Questions bounced through the air. Energy moved from desk to desk. Curiosity breathed in every corner of the room. Now it felt muted, heavy, frozen in place. One afternoon, I sat alone in the staff room, staring at my laptop screen. I had just spent over an hour writing yet another carefully worded email, explaining to a parent why group discussions mattered more than endless lectures. My eyes burned. My shoulders were locked tight. My chest felt empty, like something vital had been drained out of me. That's when the janitor walked in. His name was Mr. Peterson. He had spent 35 years in that building, long enough to see every version of a teacher, the inspired ones, the broken ones, the ones who called burnout dedication because they didn't know what else to call it. He looked at me and smiled. "Still here, kid?" "Just finishing some emails," I said, not lifting my eyes from the screen. He glanced at my laptop, then let out a quiet laugh. "Another message explaining yourself?" I looked up, surprised. "How did you know?" He eased himself into the chair across from me. "I've been watching you for 5 years," he said calmly, "and you're the strongest teacher in this building." My throat tightened. "But you're also the most exhausted." I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I didn't have the strength left. "Do you know why?" he asked. I shook my head. "Because you're trying to convince everyone that you're right." He leaned back, completely at ease. "Here's what 35 years taught me," he said. "The right people don't need convincing." The words hit harder than any complaint, harder than any evaluation form, harder than whispered criticism. "You can explain until there's nothing left of you," he continued, "and the wrong people still won't listen." Something inside my chest cracked open. Fear rushed in. "But if I don't explain," I said quietly, "they'll make my life harder." And right then, the truth surfaced. I wasn't explaining because I wanted to be understood. I was explaining because I was afraid. Afraid of judgment, afraid of confrontation, afraid of standing still while others disagreed. I didn't fully understand it yet, but my silence was about to become my power. Mr. Peterson leaned forward. "Let me ask you something," he said gently. "When did their understanding become more important than your peace?" I froze. No answer came. He didn't wait for one. "I've seen the best teachers this school ever had," he said, "and you know what they all had in common? They didn't spend their lives explaining themselves. They focused on the work. They showed up every day. They committed to excellence. Students trusted them. Growth spoke on their behalf. And the doubters? They came around eventually, without debates, without emails, without a single explanation." Mr. Peterson stood up. "Your students' success is your proof," he said calmly. "Everything else is just noise." Then he walked away. The door closed behind him. I stayed exactly where I was, silent, motionless. That question followed me like a shadow. When did their understanding become more important than my peace? At 12 p.m., sleep refused to come. I lay there in the dark, staring at nothing, replaying everything in my mind. All the energy I had burned trying to convince people. All the ideas I had buried just to stay safe. All the passion I had slowly silenced to avoid judgment. And for the first time, something shifted. Maybe I don't owe everyone an explanation. Maybe silence isn't weakness. Maybe silence is dignity. In that moment, I made a promise to myself. Clear, unshakable. I will stop explaining myself to people who aren't trying to understand. The next day, I felt different. Not louder, not defensive, calmer. When the principal criticized my teaching style, I simply said, "I appreciate your feedback." No defense, no justification. When coworkers mocked my approach, I smiled and said, "Let's see the results at the end of the year." No arguments, no tension. When parents questioned my methods, I replied, "Your child's progress will speak for itself." No panic, no long messages. At first, people didn't recognize this version of me. They pushed harder, tested limits, waited for the old version of me to come back. Some raised their voices, some grew angry. I stayed still. Instead of defending myself, I poured everything into my work, and something powerful began to unfold. First, I found peace, real peace. The weight lifted from my chest. My passion returned. My creativity woke up again. I rebuilt my lessons from the ground up. I made history breathe. I turned facts into conflict, dates into decisions, stories into lived experience. We debated. We challenged each other. We stepped into the past and felt its weight. Students stopped memorizing. They started thinking. They started feeling. They started caring. And then the results spoke clearly. By the end of the year, my students achieved the highest scores in the entire district. Students who once hated history stayed after class just to talk. Parents who used to complain began sending messages of gratitude. Respect followed, without effort. The principal began referencing my methods in meetings. Colleagues showed up at my classroom asking for guidance. Parents defended my approach before I ever had to say a word. I didn't change minds by arguing. I changed them by becoming undeniable. 1 year later, I was arranging desks when Mr. Peterson walked into my classroom holding a newspaper. On the front page was an article about Millbrook High receiving the Best Teaching Innovation Award. My name was printed right there. "Congratulations," he said. "You finally figured it out." My chest tightened. Not with pride, with gratitude. "That question you asked me," I said quietly, "it changed everything." Mr. Peterson smiled. "You were never weak," he said. "You just gave your power away every time you tried to justify yourself." He paused. "The moment you stopped," he added, "you became unstoppable." That's when it fully clicked. People don't respect endless explanations. They respect quiet confidence backed by results. He patted my shoulder. "Now you get it," he said. "Lions don't explain why they're kings. They simply are." My life changed the moment I stopped explaining myself. I wasn't trapped by difficult people. I was trapped because I handed them control over my peace. Not everyone will understand your path. And that's okay. Some will question you, some will criticize you, some will doubt you. Your job is not to convince them. Your job is to stay aligned with who you are and let your results speak. Mountains don't justify their height. They stand. Oceans don't defend their depth. They move. You are shaped by who you become when you stop chasing approval. One decision, choosing silence over explanation, can change your entire life. If this story stirred something inside you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more powerful stories. I'll see you next time.